All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our third installment of our CGA Rules of Golf seminars. Tonight, we're going to be talking about something that will help everybody, which is free relief procedures. Everybody likes a freebie. So we will talk a little bit about a few rules that include relief procedures where you don't have to pay for it. There's no penalty stroke associated with it, and you do get it for free. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Maggie Watts. I am the Director of Women's Golf here at the CGA. And with me tonight, I have Tom Roth, who is one of our tournament managers. He works in all different kinds of golf tournaments. Both of us are certified in the rules of golf and love studying all about the rules of golf, don't we, Tom? If you do have any questions tonight, please feel free to put it in the chat. Tom is going to be monitoring that, and I will be able to kind of go with those questions as they come up. So feel free to put them in at any time. We will have some question slides that come up throughout the presentation where we will address some of those questions. All right, let's get started first. Like any good golf tournament, we do have some seminar local rules. If you've been with us previously, you've probably already seen these, but please just make sure that you do keep your microphone muted. If you have any questions or comments, we are only going to entertain those if they are pertaining to the topics that we're discussing. So those free relief procedures. We'll answer those questions that are posed in the chat during the question slides. Please don't be scared to ask questions. Tom and I are here to help you and want to make sure that you go away from here feeling like you got all your questions answered. If you are a PGA and LPGA member and you are looking for your member credits, you will get information on how to receive that credit. We'll get your, reply to that email you received earlier today, and we'll get your ID and make sure you get those credits. All right. So who is the CGA? The Carolinas Golf Association is here to promote the game of golf, provide the best experience to all golfers in the Carolinas. There are state and regional golf associations all across the country, 57 of them in total, and we are the one that represents golf in North Carolina and South Carolina. We are known as an allied golf association with the USGA, who are our partners. So we do a lot of different things. I'm sure some of you have already seen some of these slides, but the number one thing we do is not even tournaments, which is what Tom and I do. We run a lot of those, but the main thing we do is help provide you with a handicap index. So if you are a CGA member, you do have a handicap index to track your performance and stay involved with the GIN system. We also have lots of different tournaments to play in, men, women, seniors, juniors, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a little bit of what types of tournaments that we have. So we run over 350 events a year, all over North and South Carolina. If you want to play golf, we got something for you to play in. With your handicap index, I hope everybody has the GIN mobile app downloaded where you can post your scores, and you get free access to a really great golf GPS where you can download courses that you're playing, check that out, and it will connect you to a community of over 3 million golfers worldwide. The CGA also provides, like tonight, some educational services. We are kind of a clearinghouse for any of our members to reach out with questions they have about the rules of golf. So you can always reach out to our CGA staff. We also have staff here at the CGA that help with any handicapping questions you might have. So if you're wondering why your 26 went all the way down to a 22, you can call our office and we can kind of explain how all that works if you're not quite sure. We do have our Carolinas Golf website and the TYGA website, which is our Tar Heel Youth Golf Association, which is a North Carolina youth golf organization that's run through the CGA. And then we have our foundation, which is a 501c3 not-for-profit. We donate approximately $180,000 in 2024 and over 3 million total since that was founded, I believe in about 1970. CGA offers many different travel opportunities. I had a chance to go down to that bottom right picture there, Casa de Campo. Awesome trip that we do usually in February. And there's other travel opportunities that you can have access to with your CGA membership. If you are so inclined, you can follow us on all of our different social media accounts. And if you are currently located in North Carolina, you could get a CGA license plate just like this. Although I think the CGA 1 has been taken from our previous executive director, Jack Nance, who retired earlier this year. His car says CGA 1 on it, which is kind of cool. They are available on the NC DMV website, or you can get it when you go to register your vehicle. All right. If you're here, that means that you have some interest in the rules of golf, in which case I would very much suggest that you download this Rules of Golf app on your smartphone. Unless you are running golf tournaments like me and Tom or studying the rules, you don't need one of these anymore, these paper books. You can just download that Rules of Golf app, and that is kind of going to be the best resource for you to learn more about the rules. There's everything from little quizzes in there that you can take. You can learn, it's got, obviously all of the rules in there. And then you can also keep notes inside of the app to learn more about the rules. So it's a really great app, and it has a search function. So if you're in the bunker and you don't know what to do, you can type bunker in there and see if your rule situation comes up. All right, so we're going to get into our program for the evening. The first rule that we're going to talk about is Rule 15. And this is going to be all about loose impediments, movable obstructions, two things that you are allowed to move on the golf course, and they won't cost you a dime. And then we're going to talk about if your ball or ball marker is helping or interfering with play out there on the golf course. We'll have a little video to get us started.
The two fundamental principles of golf are to play the ball as it lies and play the course as you find it. But sometimes you can't do that. Movable objects, either natural or artificial, are generally not treated as part of the challenge of playing the game, and you're usually allowed to remove them when they interfere. Movable obstructions are artificial objects that are easy to move, such as rakes, water bottles, player equipment, and trash cans. These objects can be moved out of your way, even in bunkers and penalty areas. While not required, it's a good practice to mark your ball before moving the obstruction. If your ball moves, there's no penalty. Replace it and play on. Leaves, branches, grass clippings, and other natural objects known as loose impediments can also get in the way of play. Fortunately, you're allowed to move them without penalty, even in bunkers and penalty areas, but there is an element of risk involved. If you cause your ball to move when removing loose impediments, you must replace it and add 1 penalty stroke. However, if this happens on the putting green, simply replace it and play on without penalty.
All right, so a lot of good information in that video, and we're gonna basically kind of take that video and expand on it a little bit going forward. So Rule 15, what we're covering tonight, is gonna talk a lot about loose impediments, which are gonna be any of those natural objects that you're gonna find on the course, like this twig or leaf that's in this photo at the top, and then also movable obstructions, which we're gonna find out are artificial objects that can be moved easily. So these movable, natural, and artificial objects are not treated as a part of challenge of playing the course, and therefore a player is normally allowed to remove them when they interfere with their play. However, player needs to be careful in moving those loose impediments that are near their ball or off the putting green, because if you do cause your ball to move while moving those loose impediments, there will be a penalty attached. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the definition of loose impediment. What you'll find in the rules of golf is that a lot of your rulings actually come from the definitions. So get started here with loose impediment. So a loose impediment is any unattached natural object such as stones, loose grass, leaves, branches, and sticks, dead animals and animal waste, worms, insects, and similar animals that can be removed easily. So think really, really small type of animals, mainly insects. And that's going to also include the mounds or webs they build. So even though that spider web is attached to that branch that is attached or growing, it is still considered to be a loose impediment. Clumps of compacted soil, such as this aeration plug. And such natural objects are not loose if they are attached or growing, solidly embedded in the ground, that is, cannot be picked out easily, or sticking to the ball. So that ball that you see there, even though that's a clump of soil that is on the ball, that is not considered a loose impediment because it is solidly sticking to the ball. There are a few special cases. So sand and loose soil are not loose impediments, even though they're natural. But that doesn't include any sort of mound built by a worm, insect, or similar animal. Dew, frost, and water are not loose impediments. Therefore, you cannot move them. Snow and natural ice, other than frost, are either loose impediments or, when on the ground, temporary water at the player's option. So this player here, if they did have interference from that snow, we're going to learn that if they treated it as a loose impediment, then they could pick up the snow and move it as long as they don't move their ball. Or if they wanted to treat it as temporary water, they could find their relief spot from that temporary water and take free relief in that way. Spider webs are loose impediments even though they are attached to another object. So you can always take your club, preferably not your hand, sometimes your face, if you're going through the woods or something like that, and no problem to move those spider webs. A live insect on the ball is a loose impediment. So if you want to wave your hand over top of the ball, you're welcome to do that, and hopefully it'll fly away or jump away. All right, there's kind of two parts of this rule that are about loose impediments. And the first part talks about your rights and your restrictions. And then the second part, when we start talking about a ball that's moved when removing a loose impediment, is the risk that you take. So first, without penalty, a player may remove a loose impediment anywhere on or off the course and may do so in any way, such as by using a hand or foot, using a club or other equipment, getting help from others, or breaking off part of a loose impediment. If a player's removal of a loose impediment causes their ball to move, the ball must be replaced on its original spot. So this gentleman is going to move some of these pine needles, which are natural objects that are loose. And it caused his ball to move, so he was required to replace that ball. Now, when he replaces that ball, he doesn't really have to move those pine needles back into position. He just needs to put the ball back on that spot. In the case that the player is not totally sure where they need to replace their ball, Rule 14.2, which we're not going to talk about in depth, but just so that you know, that rule will tell you that if you don't know where your spot was, you estimate it and place it there. So if the moved ball had been at rest anywhere except, which in this case is going to mean it's in the general area, a bunker, or a penalty area, the player gets one penalty stroke under Rule 9.4b, which is the rule that covers ball at rest moved. And this this part of this rule, because it says anywhere except, it's talking about if you cause your ball to move on the putting green or in the teeing area when trying to remove a loose impediment, there's no problem with that. So if your ball's in the teeing area, it's on the tee, you're about to play, you move a leaf and accidentally knock your ball off the tee, no problem. All you need to do is just put it back on there, tee it up, and hit it. There's no penalty for that. Same goes on the putting green. We have the accidental movement of the ball on the putting green rule, and that is going to cover you if you accidentally move your ball on the putting green when trying to move that loose impediment. So that rule is going to tell you no problem, move the loose impediment, no penalty, and then you can just put that ball back from where it moved. So there are exceptions of causing your ball to move when moving a loose impediment. And that is going to be, we're not going to get deep into this, but I did want to just cover a few times when moving a loose impediment would not be a penalty. So the first is if you are, if you accidentally move your ball when you're trying to find or identify it. So let's imagine you're next to, a little creek. There's a lot of twigs and leaves and different things, and you're trying to find your golf ball. If you're moving twigs around, moving leaves around, just kind of messing around over there, and you accidentally cause your ball to move while you're searching for it, there's not going to be a penalty for causing that ball to move, and you would then just replace it where it was and play from there. There's also a few different times during during play when you're allowed to lift or move a ball. And basically it's going to say that, if you're operating under one of those rules and you move a loose impediment that then moves the ball, no problem, no penalty. Accidental movement and trying to find or identify, so we just talked about. Accidental movement on the putting green, we talked about. So again, if you're trying to move a loose impediment on the putting green and the ball moves, no issue. And you'll just replace that ball. And then anytime you're applying a rule, so let's say, I'm taking relief from a cart path, and before I pick my ball up to take relief from a cart path, I move a leaf, which then causes my ball on the cart path to move. There's no problem with that as long as I then go on to take relief from that cart path. So that would be a time when you would not get a penalty for causing it to move when moving a loose impediment. All right. So that's all we're going to talk about loose impediments. We'll move on to movable obstructions. And we're going to start with the definitions of an obstruction and of a movable obstruction. So an obstruction is any artificial object except for integral objects, which are going to be something like that photo there on the left, which would be an object that the committee decides is integral in playing that hole. So they don't want to give you relief from that object. So if that is named as integral, then you would not receive relief. And then also boundary objects. So boundary objects are going to be the things that define out of bounds. So that could be what you traditionally see out on a golf course, the big tall white stakes that are going to define out of bounds. It could be a fence. It could be a whole number of things that are used as boundary objects. But it's important to note that obstructions do not include these. And the reason that's important to know is because you do get free relief from obstructions, but you get no relief from either those integral objects or the boundary objects. All right, so a few examples of obstructions are artificially surfaced roads and paths, buildings and rain shelters, sprinkler heads, drains, irrigation or control boxes, stakes, walls, railings, and fences, but again, not when they're boundary objects. Golf carts, mowers, cars, and other vehicles, waste containers, signposts, and benches, even your equipment, so your golf clubs, your golf bag, your umbrella, flag sticks and rakes, all of those are also obstructions. So when I'm trying to decide what is an obstruction, the first thing I think to myself is this thing artificial? So is it not a natural part of the world, of the course? So it's that first thing is, okay, is it artificial? That's how I'm deciding if it's an obstruction and how I'm going to have to proceed from there. So obstructions are either movable, which means they can be moved easily, or they are immovable, which obviously we can't pick up this cart path and take it away. So it would be an immovable obstruction. However, if part of an immovable obstruction, such as this fence, meets the definition of movable obstruction, which means we could move it easily, that part is treated as movable. So you might be thinking to yourself, why in the world do I need to know that? So the answer is, if this fence, which is an immovable obstruction, if your ball was up against the gate part of that fence, you would be allowed to open up that gate. And if that allowed you to take a swing, you would be allowed to go ahead and open the gate and swing away at your ball. And therefore, you'd be moving that movable obstruction. And that wouldn't, that would be your kind of free relief there. Paint dots and lines, such as those used to define boundaries and penalty areas, are not obstructions. So those are just paint, but you do not get any relief from those lines. An obstruction that can be moved, now we're getting into the definition of movable obstruction. So an obstruction that can be moved with reasonable effort and without damaging the obstruction or the course is a movable obstruction. Now again, we're going to talk about any part of an immovable that meets that definition is also a movable. I want to mention that this does not apply if the movable part of an immovable obstruction is not meant to be moved. So for example, this rock wall, we would call that an immovable obstruction. If you had interference from a rock right on the top, and all you needed was for that one rock to just be moved away to be able to swing at your ball, we would say that that rock is not meant to be moved. Therefore, we would not want you to move it. And that would be part of the entire immovable obstruction. So even when an obstruction is movable, like this fence, for example, you could take this whole fence apart and probably be able to play your ball as it lies. But the committee would probably define this as an immovable obstruction so that you wouldn't damage the fence. All right, so we're going to talk about your rights and restrictions with no risks this time from movable obstructions. So this rule covers the free relief that is allowed from artificial objects that meet the definition of movable obstructions. But this rule, we're going to talk about in a little bit, but this rule specifically does not give relief from immovable obstructions. All right, so without penalty, a player may remove a movable obstruction anywhere on or off the course and may do so in any way. However, there are two exceptions. So this is going to be the exception to the rule. So this is a time when you are not allowed to move a movable obstruction. So the first is tee markers must not be moved when the ball will be played from the teeing area. So this is going to say that if you walk up on the tee and you decide, I don't want to play from here, I'm going to move these tee markers up a few yards, you are not allowed to do that. So even though those are artificial, movable obstructions, easily can be moved, this rule says you are not allowed to do that. The second is a very complicated rule. If you ever want to get deep into your rules knowledge, I suggest cracking open the app and checking out Rule 11, which can be pretty difficult to understand. It's all about deliberate movement of objects, and what happens if you do that. But there is a restriction on deliberately removing a movable obstruction to affect a ball in motion. So that means, let's say, for example, you've got a ball coming up over the edge of the green, and you decide, oh my gosh, that's about to hit a rake that was placed there. I don't want it to hit this rake, so I'm going to pick it up. That rake is a movable obstruction, which almost always you are allowed to move. But in this case, because you would be moving it to deliberately affect a ball in motion, you would not be allowed to move that rake. So even though that might be your instinct to pick up that rake so the ball doesn't hit it, you would not be allowed to do that. So these are two exceptions that really don't happen that often out on the golf course. And the main thing to remember with this rule is to not be caught up in the minutia, but just to remember that if it's a movable obstruction, you can always move it on the golf course, but don't move it if it's to deliberately affect a ball in motion. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about removing that movable obstruction. So if a player's ball moves while they are removing that movable obstruction, so classic case is you've unfortunately hit your ball into the bunker, and your ball rolls right up next to the rake, and of course you're on kind of an incline there, where the rake was. You pick up the rake, and then because you're allowed to move a movable obstruction, and then your ball moves. So what do we have to do? So if that happens, there is no penalty at all, and the ball must be replaced on its original spot. So the next question that inevitably comes up is, okay, I tried to replace my ball in that spot, but it wouldn't stay. So in that case, you're going to try and replace it on the spot where it was, twice. So 2 times. You got to try and put it down 2 times. If it rolls away both times, now you're going to find the nearest spot where that ball will stay. So it might be 2 inches away, it might be 3 feet away, but you're going to have to find that spot where that ball will stay, and it's got to be that nearest spot to where your ball originally lie. Okay, now we're going to talk about if the ball ends up on or in a movable obstruction. So this handkerchief might be lying in the fairway and your ball ends up on top of it. So the player may take free relief if you end up in or on a movable obstruction, except on the putting green, by lifting the ball, removing the movable obstruction, and dropping the original ball or another ball in this relief area, which we'll talk about in a second. But you can see here, this ball is in the general area because it's in the fairway. So this part of the rule talks about anywhere on the course except a putting green. All right. So you're just going to pick up that ball, pick up the movable obstruction, and then your relief area is going to be created by the reference point, which is the estimated point right under where that ball was at rest or in or on the movable obstruction. So that becomes that exact point. And then you're going to measure 1 club length from that point, and you can drop anywhere inside that relief area. Now, in an everyday type of sense, we're not going to ask you every time to pull your driver out of your bag, come here, figure out what your reference point is, put a tee in the ground, measure out that whole 1 club length area, and then drop. That's a long process. That is not something that you have to do every single time. All you would need to do is know the spot from that was directly under where your ball was on that movable obstruction, and then just drop within a club length, no closer to the hole behind it. So that's really all you need to do. You don't have to measure every single time unless you're just not sure exactly what the whole full club length would be. So some of the limits here, you must not be closer to the hole than the reference point, and you must be in the same area of the course as the reference point. So that basically means if you're in the general area, which is the fairway here, you would not be allowed to go from the fairway to a bunker, or from the fairway to a penalty area, or from the fairway to the green. You would need to stay in the general area, which would be defined as basically the fairway or the rough, probably in this situation, but there would be no distinguishing between the fairway and the rough in this situation. So if your ball is on a movable obstruction on the putting green, the player may take relief by lifting the ball, removing the movable obstruction, and then placing the original ball or another ball on the estimated spot right under where it was at rest on that movable obstruction. So in this case, on the putting green only, you would place the ball on the spot where it was underneath that movable obstruction. So just to recap, if the ball is on a movable obstruction anywhere except putting green, we're gonna drop within a club length of the spot where it was underneath the movable obstruction. If your ball is on the putting green, we're gonna place it exactly on that spot. All right. We're at a question slide. Tom, anything we need to talk about? Or I think Tom was answering a few of your questions in the chat.
We did have a couple questions that we can just go over. So the first one, what are fans near the green? So fans are considered temporary immovable obstructions, and you would get relief from those. The second one, if a putt is conceded in match play, can the player that conceded it rescind the concession before it is lifted or any other shot is played? Once you make a concession in match play, that is final, and that concession cannot be withdrawn.
Just a reminder too, I appreciate the match play question, love match play. But we do want to keep our questions to the presentation that we're working on.
Next one was, can a towel be used to move loose impediments? And then when you're removing loose impediments, you are allowed to use any equipment, a club or your hand. So you would be able to use a towel to remove a loose impediment. And then we just got two more. So if your playing partner moves the rake that was on the green, are you assessed a penalty? You didn't ask them to pick up the rake. You know that one?
So let's not get in the weeds too much. I'll kind of answer that. Anybody can move a movable obstruction anytime. So we're assuming that all the balls are at rest. The rake is not affecting anybody's play. So anybody can move that rake. I think what you might be thinking about is if somebody moves a rake and a ball was speeding towards it, which I had kind of used in the presentation. The person who moved that rake could be at risk for a penalty there. We'd have to kind of figure out exactly why they moved the rake. It is, it's I believe that one's an intent-based rule. So we can get back to that. Feel free to shoot us an email if you have a specific situation you wanted to talk about. It also, you say playing partner, it becomes a question of, is it your actual partner? Are you playing in a best ball kind of event, or is it just another player in your group? So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that. That's kind of a Rule 11 question, but happy to kind of talk you through that situation offline anytime. So you can always email us at rules@carolinasgolf.org.
And then we got one more. So a ball is resting next to a rake in the general area in close proximity to a bunker. The ball is also resting on top of a leaf. Once the rake is removed, is the player required to place the ball back on the leaf? And the answer there is yes. Since your ball is already at rest on top of that leaf, and any action to remove that leaf would move the ball, then you would have to place it back on top of that leaf. You don't get get out of just being able to remove that leaf just because you picked up your ball. You still have to replace it back where it was at rest on top of that leaf. Questions?
Great. All right. All right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more in Rule 15. This is kind of a fun rule to talk about. I know for those of us that maybe watch the PGA Tour, we hear a little bit about backstopping and things like that with leaving balls on the green to help other players. And we're just going to talk through this rule very briefly and just kind of introduce you to it because I know it is something that happens on the golf course more often than some people may think. Okay, so first we're going to talk about a ball on putting green that is helping play. The most important thing here when you hear the word helping is going to be this is only going to apply to a ball that is at rest on the putting green and not anywhere else on the course. So helping is putting green only. So if a player reasonably believes that a ball on the putting green might help anyone's play, so it could be, I think that player C's ball is going to help Tom's play. I can say something. The player may mark the spot of the ball and lift it under this rule if it is their own ball. And just keep in mind that lifted ball must be replaced soon. Or if the ball belongs to another player, you can require the other player to mark the spot and lift the ball. So again, just to reiterate, this is a ball on the putting green only that I believe may help another player's play. If it's my own ball, I can mark it and pick it up. And if it's somebody else's ball, I can require them to mark it and pick it up. Stroke play only, so let's not think about any matches, but in stroke play only, a player who is required to lift a ball may play first instead. So if you don't want to lift it, you can go ahead and just putt out or hit your shot or whatever it might be. And if two or more players agree to leave a ball in place to help any player, and that player then makes a stroke with the helping ball left in place. So we've got an agreement from two people that they want to leave a ball to help another player. And then we've also got the player then making the stroke, so hitting their ball with the helping ball left in place. If that happens, each player who made that agreement is going to get the general penalty, which in stroke play is 2 penalty strokes. So if Tom and I agree that he's going to leave his ball in place so that I have a backstop, let's say, from hitting this bunker shot, because I think I might scream it across the green, as I probably would do. I want him to leave that ball there in case it hits it. And he says, yeah, sure, I'll leave that ball there. At that point, we are going to get 2 penalty strokes each. Now, we're not going to get much into clarifications, but we do get a lot of questions about this. So I did want to mention there's a secondary part of the rules of golf where they kind of clarify different rules. And that's why you see this 15.3a/1 and then the heading there. And so these clarifications kind of give you a little more background on understanding a specific rule. So this clarification is basically saying, even if Tom and I didn't know that we weren't allowed to do that, we are still going to get the 2 penalty strokes for doing this. So basically, my ignorance in not knowing the rule is not going to get me out of that 2-stroke penalty. Furthermore, if we actually do know that we're not allowed to make that agreement, so if a rules official were to walk up to us on the green and say, hey, you know, did you guys know that you weren't allowed to leave that ball there to help with their play? And we both say, yeah, we knew we weren't supposed to, but, you know, I was really afraid my ball was going to go in this penalty area behind the green. And Tom says, yeah, I knew, but you know, we were nervous about the ball going off, so we just left it. Now we're in a bigger situation because we knew we weren't allowed to do it. We did it anyway, and now we're both going to get disqualified. And that's going to be for deliberately ignoring this rule. So the rules of golf are not very kind to people who know the rules and then choose not to apply them. So not a situation that happens that often in your everyday play, but something we like to just chat about. Okay, now we're going to talk about a ball interfering anywhere on the course with play. So helping, putting green only, interfering can be anywhere on the course. First, interference under this rule exists when another player's ball at rest might interfere with the player's area of intended stance or area of intended swing, is on or close to the player's line of play, such that given the intended stroke, there is a reasonable chance that the player's ball in motion could hit that ball. And also could be if it's close enough to distract the player in making the stroke. So this would all be considered interference by another player's ball. If a player reasonably believes that another player's ball anywhere on the course might interfere with the player's own play, the player may require the other player to mark the spot and lift the ball, and the ball must not be cleaned. After the other player plays, that ball must be replaced on its original spot without being cleaned. So a few things I want to reiterate here. First of all, this can only be determined by the player who feels like another ball is interfering with their own play. So Tom can't come in and say, you know, Maggie, your ball is interfering with player C's play, and so you need to mark it and pick it up. Only player C would be allowed to tell me, hey, that ball is interfering with my play. Okay. Second thing, when we do this, we must mark the spot, and then we're going to lift that ball and we can't clean it. So we've all seen people, I don't have a golf ball with me right now, but where they take the ball and they do this pinching motion with the ball. That is going to be what you need to do, and make sure that you do not do anything to clean that ball, or you could be subject to a penalty for cleaning that ball. And then a lot of times people will just take it, place it over to the side, let that person hit their shot, bring their ball back, place it there at the marker, which is a replace on that original spot. So if the other player does not mark the spot before lifting the ball or cleans it when not allowed, they get 1 penalty stroke. So that is the penalty structure for not marking it or cleaning that lifted ball. In stroke play only, a player required to lift their ball under this rule may play first instead. So in match play, we know the order of play really matters, so that's not going to apply in match play. But in stroke play, players are required, or if you're required to do it, you may just play first instead. A player is not allowed to lift their ball under this rule based only on the player's own belief that the ball might interfere with another player's play. So if I think that my ball is interfering with Tom, I can't just decide, okay, that's interfering with Tom, I'm going to pick up my own ball and, you know, help him out. I would not be allowed to do that. I would need Tom to say, hey, your ball is interfering with my play. Can you please pick it up? If the player lifts their ball when not required to do so by the other player, and this is going to be anywhere that's not on the putting green, because of course you can always mark your ball and lift it on the putting green. Anyway, if a player does this when they're not required to do so, the player is going to get 1 penalty stroke. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about ball markers. So we're going to go into our definition of ball marker and then what to do if one of those is helping or interfering with play. So a ball marker is an artificial object when used to mark the spot of a ball to be lifted, such as a tee, a coin, an object made to be a ball marker, or another small piece of equipment.
Here's a few things you can use as a ball marker that you just might find surprising. So if we look at the definition of ball marker, the only actual requirement is that it must be artificial. Leaves, sticks, and other natural objects would not be allowed. It does cite some examples and it even uses the word small, but if you notice here, it says such as, which means these are just recommendations and not requirements. So a ball marker isn't technically limited in size. So if you needed to, you could use your shoe as a ball marker. You could use your hat, a glove, your cell phone, a towel, and I think you get the idea. Now, even though these objects are allowed, they're not recommended because the larger and more awkwardly shaped they are, the more difficult it is to get the ball back on its original spot. But no matter what artificial object you use, as long as you get the ball back on its original spot, you're within the rules.
That's it. Okay, before we go on to this, we did have a couple questions I wanted to mention because they're kind of relevant to what we're talking about. We were talking about the agreement with players agreeing to leave a ball that is helping in place and they could be subject to that penalty. The question was about what is kind of an agreement, and the rules of golf say that you must actually agree with each other. So silence does not institute an agreement. But in this case with backstopping, there would be a lot of questions about it. You would have some, this happens occasionally on the PGA Tour, and an agreement does have to be between two people, and it has to be said out loud. But there are probably some gestures that could be made that could potentially get you into that realm of agreement. So the main thing is you guys all know now that you're not allowed to leave a helping ball in place, and therefore you can't, you shouldn't try to circumvent the rules by doing that without, saying out loud, I'm going to leave this ball in place. The rules kind of assume that everyone is going to act with integrity. And what was the other question, Tom?
Just about the mud ball.
Oh, there was a question about replacing a ball and whether you're allowed to replace it in a way that the mud would be facing a different direction. The rules do not specify that you have to replace your ball in exactly the same rotation as you picked it up. So it would not, as long as you get it on the right spot, I don't think it would matter much which way that mud was facing. We just need you to get it back in that right spot. All right, so getting back to our ball marker helping or interfering. So if a ball marker might help or interfere with play, a player may move the ball marker out of the way if it is their own, or if the ball marker belongs to another player, require that that player move the ball marker out of the way for the same reasons as they were required to lift it earlier in this rule. So basically this is going to say that if you think your ball marker might help or interfere, and this is ball marker only, you are welcome to move that ball marker in a direction so that it does not help or interfere. Ball marker must be moved out of the way to a new spot, and it should be measured from its original spot, such as by using one or more club head lengths. I've also seen people lay down their entire putter to get that ball completely out of the way, or get that ball marker completely out of the way. That's totally fine. When moving the ball marker back, the player should do so by measuring from the new spot and reversing the steps used to move the ball marker out of the way. So I think all of us have done this at some point out on the golf course, but just make sure you put it back the same way you took it away. The same process should be applied if a player moved an interfering ball out of the way by measuring from the ball. So this is just saying if you were gonna place your ball over to the side, you could measure that as well. All right. So the penalty for the breach of this rule would be the general penalty, which in stroke play is 2 penalty strokes, and in match play would be loss of hole. And just want to make clear that this penalty also applies if the player makes a stroke without waiting for a helping ball or ball marker to be lifted or moved. So if I'm required to wait for Tom to lift his helping ball and I don't, I go ahead and play. I would then get that 2-stroke penalty in stroke play. And after becoming aware that another player intended to lift or move it under this rule or had required someone else to do so, that's if I make a stroke after I become aware that another player intended to lift or move it. And also this penalty also applies if I refuse to lift my ball or move my ball marker. So we've all been in that scenario where somebody in your group is not being very nice and says, well, I'm not going to move it. If that's the case, then that person is going to get the general penalty. If a stroke is made by another player who might have been helped or interfered with. All right, I know we answered a couple of those questions. Anything of note here, Tom?
We just got one more. So if you think your ball may interfere with another player, are you supposed to ask them or wait for them to require you to mark it? So that also kind of depends on what area of the course your ball is in. If you're on the putting green, you can mark your ball at any time. But if you're anywhere else on the course, you would need the other player to confirm that your ball is interfering with their play. So that one kind of depends on where you are on the course.
That's right. And I would just add that, you can ask a fellow competitor anything. I mean, you could say, hey, is that ball in your way? And they could say, yeah, you know what? It really is. Could you mark it? And then, yeah, that's fine. What the rule is really trying to say is I can't decide that I'm interfering with Tom's play and then decide to pick it up myself. So I can ask him, hey, is that interfering with your play? If he says yes, then I would pick it up. If he says no, don't worry about it, I'm not allowed to pick it up. So that would be that big difference there. Are we good on questions?
Yep.
All right. We're going to move on to our next rule, which is Rule 16. As a rules official, this is the #1 rule. I think over 70% of rulings that are given by rules officials in the world are about Rule 16. So it does come up a lot. I'm sure all of us have taken relief from a cart path in their playing career. So we're going to learn a little bit more about how to go about taking relief from abnormal course conditions.
The 2 fundamental principles of golf are play the ball as it lies and play the course as you find it. But there are 4 conditions that are not considered part of the challenge when playing the game. These are collectively referred to as abnormal course conditions, and you aren't required to play from them. These include temporary water, animal holes, immovable obstructions, and ground under repair. Golf courses decide when an area is abnormal, and it generally needs to be marked. Also, there are certain conditions which are ground under repair by default, such as holes made by maintenance staff and any material like grass clippings or brush piled for removal. If you want to play your ball as it lies from any of these abnormal course conditions, go ahead, but you are allowed to take relief without penalty, and here's how. First, you need to determine the nearest point of complete relief, no closer to the hole where the abnormal course condition no longer interferes with your lie, stance, or swing. It's helpful to mark that spot with a T. Then determine the area within 1 club length, again, no closer to the hole. Drop your ball and play on. To learn more about the nearest point of complete relief, check out that video in this series.
The USGA does a really nice job with a lot of their videos, and I would suggest that if you kind of have an interest in learning more about the rules of golf, if you go to the rules section on the USGA's website, they have a ton of really great resources and a lot of things that are there for free that you can really take advantage of. All right, talking about Rule 16. This rule covers when and how the player may take free relief by playing a ball from a different place, such as when there is interference by an abnormal course condition or a dangerous animal condition. These conditions are not treated as part of the challenge of playing the course, and free relief is generally allowed, except in the penalty area. I think it's nice that if an alligator is really, really close to my ball, that is not treated as part of the challenge of playing the course. The player normally takes relief by dropping a ball in a relief area based on the nearest point of complete relief. This rule also covers free relief when a player's ball is embedded in its own pitch mark in the general area. We'll talk about that at the end. So an abnormal course condition, we're back to our definitions. An abnormal course condition, also known as an ACC sometimes, are any of these four defined conditions. So an animal hole, ground under repair, which is usually marked with white paint or white stakes. Immovable obstructions, it's gonna be things like your cart paths, or temporary water. So first, animal hole is any hole dug in the ground by an animal, except, so you'll see in the rules a lot of times it'll tell you what something is and it'll tell you what it's not. So in this case, except for holes dug by animals that are also defined as loose impediments. And you guys, we just learned this, so that's going to include things like worms or insects. So a hole made by a worm is not going to be an animal hole. But in this case, an animal is going to be any living member of the animal kingdom other than humans, including mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrates. So you thought you knew what an animal was coming into this presentation, but now you really know what the rules of golf consider an animal. The term animal hole includes the loose material the animal dug out of the hole, any worn down track or trail leading into the hole, and any area on the ground pushed up or altered as a result of the animal digging the hole underground. It's going to include all those things that are part of that animal hole. An animal hole does not include any animal footprints that are not part of the worn down track or trail leading into the hole. Just like we talked about, an animal is any living member of the animal kingdom other than humans, including mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrates. So if this little puppy over here makes a big hole in this bunker, you would be entitled to relief from that animal hole. Ground under repair is going to be any part of the course the committee defines to be ground under repair, whether by marking it or otherwise. All ground inside the edge of the defined area and any grass, bush, tree, or other growing or attached natural object that's rooted in the defined area, including any part that extends up above the ground. So in this photo, if your ball ended up at the very top of that big round bush, even though it extends up above the ground, your ball would be considered to be inside the ground under repair, assuming it's defined by that edge of the grass there. But not when such object is attached to the ground or is below the ground outside the edge of the defined area. So such as this is going to be like a tree root that is part of a tree that is outside of the edge. So any part of that tree that's extending up above and outside the line would be part of the ground under repair, but anything that's underground or on the ground, such as these roots, would not be considered part of that ground under repair. Roots just go way too far. It would be very difficult to be able to tell when defining ground under repair if the roots are from a tree that's in it or the roots are from some other tree somewhere else. All right. Ground and repair also includes the following things, which are, even if the committee does not define them as such. So any hole that's made by the committee, so that could be this hole from a penalty area stake that the player removes. If somehow the player in front of you removed this penalty area stake and your ball ended up inside that hole, you would be entitled to relief from it. Also is going to include if you have a double green at your golf course that serves two different holes. The hole on that green that is not the hole you are playing to for your hole would also be considered ground under repair. Any hole that is used for maintaining the course. So these guys are putting in, looks like a new irrigation system. All of those holes, even if we didn't have a white line around it, would be considered ground under repair. And grass cuttings and leaves and any other material that is piled for later removal. So that's the kicker there, is that somebody is coming back for this pile. Unlike something like this, where you may have natural materials that are not going to be picked up later. So any natural materials that are piled for removal are also loose impediments, but any materials left on the course, kind of like in this photo, that are not intended to be removed are not going to be considered ground and repair. So we've all seen those areas of the course where your maintenance staff dumps out their grass clippings after the green. Usually it's in the edge of the woods or somewhere like that. Those would not be considered ground under repair because nobody's coming back to get them. Any animal habitat, such as a bird's nest, that is so near a player's ball that the player's stroke or stance might damage it, would be considered ground under repair. Except when the habitat has been made by animals that are defined as loose impediments, such as worms or insects. So the beehive, for example, would not be considered ground under repair, but I can almost guarantee you that the committee would give you relief from that beehive. The edge of the ground under repair should be defined by stakes, lines, or physical features. In this case, we've got the edge that's defined by stakes. That would mean that you can pretend there's a line going from each of those stakes on the outside edge that would create that ground under repair. And then if there's not stakes, there a lot of times it'll be defined as a line. So that white line, everything inside that's going to be ground under repair. All right, moving on to immovable obstructions. So any obstruction that cannot be moved without unreasonable effort or without damaging the obstruction or the course, and otherwise does not meet the definition of a movable obstruction. So this water fountain here and the little fence that's around it and the looks like an artificial path that's been created around that water fountain, all of that would be considered an immovable obstruction because I can't go over to it and pick it up and move it. The committee may define any obstruction to be an immovable obstruction, even if it meets the definition of movable obstruction. So again, this fence we talked about, if I were running a tournament at this golf course, I would want to call this an immovable obstruction, even though technically you might be able to move some of those planks. All right, temporary water definition. Any temporary accumulation of water on the surface of the ground, such as puddles from rain or irrigation or overflow from a body of water. Important, it's not in a penalty area, which means it would either be in the teeing area, general area, bunker, or putting green. And can be seen before or after the player takes his stance without pressing down excessively. We've all seen the person who wants to get that temporary water relief start dancing around. We always say it's the stance, not the dance, when you can see that water. So whenever you are standing still, taking that stance, if water comes up over the soles of your shoes, that would be considered temporary water. It is not enough for the ground to be merely wet, muddy, or soft. Those are unfortunate circumstances, but not circumstances where you would get free relief. or for the water to be momentarily visible as the player steps on the ground. An accumulation of water must remain present either before or after the stance is taken. We talked a little bit about this before, but some special cases: dew and frost are not temporary water. Snow and natural ice could be temporary water if they're on the ground, or they could be loose impediments at the player's option. And fun fact, manufactured ice, so if you got it out of a machine, it's considered artificial and therefore it is an obstruction. Okay. A lot of times when we're going through these seminars, we spend a lot of times talking about definitions. And the reason that we spend so much time talking about the definitions of things is that you have to know what something is to know what rule to apply. So that's why it's important to know if something is an immovable or an immovable obstruction, if something's a loose impediment, or if it's an obstruction. And so that's kind of why we spend so much time on those definitions, to learn those so that we can then apply them to the rules. So again, this abnormal course condition rule is going to cover animal holes, ground under repair, immovable obstructions, or temporary water. And we're going to learn how we can get free relief from those areas. Just a reminder, this rule does not give relief from boundary objects or integral objects. And again, this is a commonly misunderstood rule. Those white stakes that are out there defining out of bounds are boundary objects and cannot be moved, and you do not get any free relief from them. All right, we've got another definition, because in order to take relief under this rule, we've got to understand what the nearest point of complete relief is. We kind of saw it in the video at the beginning of this section of the presentation. We're going to watch a little part of that again.
The first step in taking relief from conditions such as ground under repair, temporary water, or immovable obstructions is to find the nearest point of complete relief, no closer to the hole. This location is the spot either left of, right of, or behind your ball where the condition you are taking relief from no longer interferes with your stance or swing. You determine this spot by simulating the stance, swing, and direction of play you would use to play your ball if the condition didn't exist. The nearest point can change based on a variety of things, including whether you're right or left-handed, your height, or your choice of club. In this case, the player's nearest point of complete relief from the cart path is not to the left in the clear, but rather under the tree. It's good practice to figure out your options before lifting your ball, because sometimes playing it as it lies might be the best choice.
All right. Well, before we go on, we did have a question I kind of wanted to bring up, since we were talking about definitions and talking about ground under repair. There's a question about if an area that seems to be ground under repair is not marked on the golf course. Can the players in the group agree that that section would be ground under repair, and then allow that player to take relief from that ground under repair? The question, there's a lot of different answers here, and I'll just kind of run through it first. The only things that are definitely considered ground under repair are in that definition of GUR. So something like a hole made by a greenskeeper is always going to be GUR, and you would not have to have approval necessarily, although you should ask somebody probably just to make sure. You wouldn't have to have approval to take relief from that hole made by a greenkeeper, because it falls in the definition of ground under repair. However, most of the time with ground under repair, what people are taking relief from is some area of the course that has been maybe worked on by the maintenance staff, or, you know, it might just be a rough area of the course that, you know, is unlike, it's an abnormal area of the course. And people might say, you know, I think I deserve relief from this, and everybody in your group might agree with you. If it does not meet any definition, any part of that definition of ground under repair, it's going to be up to the committee to decide if that is indeed ground under repair. So at your own golf course, that committee would be the people in the pro shop, your head pro, assistant pro, whoever might be on staff that day. And if you are in a CGA event, that might be me as a rules official, or Tom, or any member of some of our committees out there. So just because and I'll say specifically in a stroke play competition, or in a stroke, and when you're playing stroke play, it would be, you would not be allowed to decide within your group, hey, that's ground under repair, take relief. That's because we have to protect the whole rest of the field. So if it's a 100-player event and 3 people in group 26 decide, hey, you know, that's ground under repair, we're going to play it as ground under repair today, but all the other people in every other group didn't decide that, well, this group has gotten an advantage that the rest of the course did not get. So the suggested move there would be to play 2 balls. You take relief with 1 ball, play your ball, the other ball as it lies. And we won't go through that whole procedure, but in stroke play, that's the way that you could try to take relief and also play your original ball, play both balls through the hole, decide which one you want to score with, and then tell the committee later that, you know, what you did and what the scores were, and how you should proceed. In match play, if Tom and I are playing a match against each other and I say, hey, Tom, I think this spot should be ground and repair. If Tom says, hey, yeah, cool, looks like ground and repair to me, let's roll with it. Then we're going to treat that as ground and repair, because we are playing in a competition that is in a bubble of just me and Tom. So in that case, we wouldn't be affecting anybody else by determining that that area is ground under repair. Therefore, I could take relief and keep it moving. But I know that kind of got in the weeds a little bit, but the bottom line here is you would not be able to just decide within your group in a stroke play competition that, hey, that looks like ground under repair to me.
So we just had another question about aerification holes. Are aerification holes considered GUR? Even though they are made by the maintenance staff, they aren't considered GUR. You do get relief from those aeration holes, specifically. And aeration holes has its own rule in the book under the committee's procedures. But aeration holes are not considered GUR, even though they are made by the maintenance staff.
Correct. So when we think of a hole made by the maintenance staff, we're talking about an actual, like, large hole that's been dug. Aeration plugs and the holes created when those are pulled out would not fall under that. Anything else, Tom? We're gonna keep it moving? All right. Okay, so you all just watched that video about nearest point of complete relief. They do a really good job. I'm going to briefly kind of go over what they said. So again, nearest point of complete relief is a reference point for taking relief from an abnormal course condition, dangerous animal condition. Both of those we're talking about in this rule. If you were to find yourself on a wrong green, in a no play zone, or in taking relief under other certain local rules, which would just be pertaining to a certain competition. All right, so nearest point of relief, kind of our highlights here. We're finding the spot nearest to the ball's original position. So this gentleman may want to take relief over on the right side of the path. Actually, he probably wouldn't. He can pop it over these trees a little easier on the left side, but either way, he doesn't have a choice. You can't decide to go to the right or the left. You must choose that spot that's going to be nearest to the spot of where the original ball is. And it's got to be in the required area of the course, where there is no interference from the condition from which relief is being taken. for the stroke the player would have made from the original spot if the condition were not there. So if this player would normally play a little punch 6-iron, he should take his little punch 6-iron stance and swing, go to either side and figure out how far it would be from that original spot. Whichever one is nearer to the spot of the original ball, that's going to be his nearest point of complete relief. Just a reminder, the condition it must be complete relief, so he must not have any interference from that path once he takes relief. So that's going to include his club, stance, swing, and line of play. This is, we're talking about estimating the reference point. I'm getting ahead of myself. When you're estimating that reference point, you're supposed to use the club, the swing, line of play, the stance that you would normally use for a shot from that spot on the path, the immovable obstruction. So when you're measuring where that nearest point of complete relief is going to be, that's how you would do that. Player does not need to stimulate the stroke by taking an actual stance or swinging with the chosen clubs. You don't have to do that, but you can and should to make an accurate estimate if it's not obvious. Okay, so the nearest point of complete relief relates solely to the particular condition from which relief is being taken and may be in a location where there is interference by something else. So this is probably, Tom, would you agree, this is the #1 question I might get asked about taking relief from immovable obstructions?
The nearest point isn't always the nicest point. In this case, the player's nearest point of complete relief from this path is under the tree, not to the left of the path in the clear. So, it's a good idea not to lift your ball before figuring this out, because sometimes the best option is to just play the ball as it lies.
So oftentimes when I come up, on a ruling at a tournament and I see a ball on a path and I can already tell where the ball is going to need to be dropped is going to be in a spot the player probably isn't going to want to go, I'll say, let's not touch your ball yet. Let's see where your where your nearest point of complete relief is going to be before you touch it. Because in this case, that gentleman is going to have to drop over there on the right-hand side underneath that tree. So if the player takes relief and then has interference by another condition from which relief is allowed, the player may take relief again by determining a new nearest point of complete relief from the new condition. So imagine you taking relief from a cart path, and then when you take relief from the cart path, you end up having relief from temporary water. In that case, you would then take relief again from the new condition. Relief must be taken separately for each condition, except that the player may take relief from both conditions at the same time. When having already taken separately, it's become reasonable to conclude that continuing to do so is just going to send you back and forth to where you're going to have interference from each other. So you take relief from the path, and then you drop, and everything is correct, and now you've got interference with the temporary water. You start taking relief from the temporary water. Now you've got interference from the path. If that keeps happening back and forth, you then would just combine those two areas, find your nearest point from where you'd have relief from both, and move on from there. The trick here is that you can't just do that right out of the gate. You have to take relief from each one separately first. Questions, Tom? Anything to mention?
We just had a question. If the obstruction is designated as a TIO, the player has the option of which side to take relief. Is that correct? And that is correct. They do have the option to take relief on either side for that temporary movable obstruction.
So we're not going to get into temporary movable obstructions on this call, but again, if you do have any specific questions about your course or something that happened in a tournament you played in, you can reach out to us offline, rules@carolinasgolf.org.
And then we just had a follow-up on that. So when taking relief, is it a club length or just the nearest point? That would be just the near.
So we're gonna get into that relief procedure here just next. So
We'll hold off on that one.
okay, so first we have to, before we determine where our relief is going to be, we've got to determine if we do actually have interference. So in this case, interference exists when any one of these is true. So the player's ball touches or is in or is on an abnormal course condition. So that just is going to be, that's what a lot of times we refer to as live ball. Next, an abnormal course condition physically interferes with the player's area of intended stance or area of intended swing. And only when the ball is on the putting green, so not all the time, only with the ball on the putting green, an abnormal course condition on or off the putting green intervenes on the line of play. So this ball here is on the putting green. I want to putt directly at the flagstick. I would be entitled to relief because I have interference on my line of play on the putting green. If the abnormal course condition is close enough to distract the player, but does not meet any of these requirements, there's no interference under this rule. So even though this player might be distracted by the sprinkler head that's in between her and her ball, she would not be entitled to relief in this case because she doesn't meet the requirement of interference, which would be her live ball, stance, swing in this case. Okay. So when is relief allowed? So relief is allowed anywhere on the course except when the ball is in the penalty area. So this player who has interference from this bridge would not be allowed relief because her ball is in the penalty area. So relief from interference by an abnormal condition is allowed under this rule only when both the abnormal course condition is on the course, meaning it's not out of bounds, and the ball is anywhere on the course except in a penalty area. So if your ball is in the penalty area and you're standing on a cart path like this player, you would not get relief from your stance on the cart path because the ball's in the penalty area. So if you want relief from that condition, you'd have to take relief under the penalty area rules, which is going to cost you a penalty stroke. Also, there's no relief when it is clearly unreasonable. So when playing the ball as it lies is clearly unreasonable, such as this bottom photo where the ball is kind of tucked inside this rock because of something from which the player is not allowed to take free relief, they are not allowed to take relief. Also, no relief when interference exists only because a player chooses a club, type of stance, or type of swing, or direction of play that is clearly unreasonable under the circumstances. All right, so this person clearly took his normal stance, then he moved his foot back so he'd be standing on this sprinkler head or whatever that might be. That's clearly unreasonable. He didn't need to take his stance like that. Therefore, he is not going to get relief from that.
After an errant tee shot out to the right, you find yourself in a bit of a tough spot where playing a normal right-handed shot isn't ideal. So you decide to punch one back into play using a left-handed swing. And in doing so, you're now standing on the cart path. Would you be allowed to take free relief from the cart path? Yes, because using an abnormal swing doesn't preclude you from taking relief as long as the stroke you're trying to make isn't clearly unreasonable. And here's another example of how this works. Now, to take relief, you're going to find the nearest point of complete relief using a left-handed stroke. That point may be located inside the tree, in which case you can just estimate. From that estimated spot, you get a 1 club length relief area to drop the ball in. And here's the best part. After completing the relief procedure, you're now free to use a normal right-handed swing because it says so right here. And to learn more golf rules just like this, go to usga.org/rules101.
All right, in this case, in this video, it was not clearly unreasonable that the player wouldn't be able to hit that shot. So if the ball, let's say, was tucked up under the tree, that might be clearly unreasonable. But this ball was right there next to the tree. All you'd have to do is kind of flip the club around, hit a left-handed shot. Therefore, it was a reasonable stroke to be made. And because he was then standing on the cart path, he was able to get relief from that immovable obstruction. Just kind of wanted to show two different sides there of when something would be clearly reasonable and when something would not be clearly would be clearly unreasonable. All right, Tom, I'm finally here. We're going to talk about taking relief from these abnormal course conditions. So we're going to talk first about when your ball is in the general area. So if a player's ball is in the general area and there is interference by an abnormal course condition on the course, the player may take free relief by dropping the original ball or another ball in this relief area. So your reference point, like we talked about, is your nearest point of complete relief. So in this photo, you'll see that that white line is around the ground under repair, which is an abnormal course condition. The player is going to find the nearest spot. Now, keep in mind, your nearest spot could be to the right, to the left, or directly behind where your ball lies. In this case, nearest spot was directly behind. That becomes your nearest point of complete relief from that area. And then you're going to get that one club length area from that spot. So I think the question that was asked earlier was about, do you get a club length from your nearest point of relief? The answer here is yes. So in a general area, which is going to be most areas of the course other than penalty areas, bunkers, teeing area, or the putting green, you're going to get a full one club length area, no closer to the hole from that nearest point of complete relief. In this case, when you're taking this free relief, you must drop the ball in the general area. So you can't go from the fairway to a bunker or from the fairway to a penalty area or fairway to the green. Not near the hole, and you must take complete relief. So that means you would have no interference from your stance, your area of intended swing, or your lie of ball in this case. All right, if your ball is in a bunker and you have interference from this abnormal course condition, and this photo would be the temporary water, the player may take either free relief or penalty relief, and we're going to talk about it. So free relief, which is what we like in this presentation, the player can take free relief, and your reference point would be your nearest point of complete relief, and then you're going to measure it to be in the bunker. So in the general area, we talked about it had to be in a general area. In this case, because your ball's in the bunker, we've got to stay in the bunker in order to get free relief. If there is no such nearest point of complete relief in the bunker, the player may still take this relief by using the point of maximum available relief in the bunker as the reference point. So what is the point of maximum available relief? That is the reference point for taking free relief from an ACC in a bunker or on the putting green when there is no nearest point of complete relief. So that's a whole lot of words to say. There's water in this bunker, and I can't get away from it without getting closer to the hole. Okay, so as you can see in this illustration, this player does not have very many options for free relief from this temporary water in the bunker. So the way I would figure out how to take relief is to find my maximum available relief point. So it's going to be the estimated point where the ball would lie that is nearest to the original spot, but not near the hole, and in the required area of the course, in this case, the bunker, and where that abnormal course condition least interferes with the stroke the player would have made from the original spot if the condition was not there. So again, it's gonna be where it least interferes. So when estimating that spot, you're gonna use whatever club stance swing that you would have used for the stroke. And then we're going to figure out, for me and my game, what is that maximum available relief. And you're going to compare that to the relative amount of interference with the lie of the ball and the player's area of intended stance and swing. So in this case, in a bunker, it might be that you go from super deep water where your ball lies to not super deep water, so less deep water, shallower water at the edge. It also might mean that you go from having interference from your live ball, so your ball was touching the water. Now you can bring the ball back with your relief, and your nearest point of maximum available relief would be just your stance, or part of your stance is in the water, but your ball is actually now on the sand. So it basically just means, even though you can't get complete relief, we're going to try and find a spot where you can get the maximum available relief. The other place this happens could be on the putting green. So in this case, the point of maximum available relief is found by comparing the relative amount of interference on the putting green. It could be with your line of play. So skip this slide. I already talked about it. On the putting green, the point of maximum available relief may be where, like you can see on that right hand angle, where you go through the least amount of water. So even though you're still having to go through that temporary water, that would be the least amount you'd have to go through. Therefore, it would be the maximum available relief. It's kind of a difficult concept to think of, but just imagine a time when you really can't find a nearest point of relief, and so you're basically figuring out what's the next best thing, and that would be that maximum available relief. Okay, if your ball is in a bunker and you have and you do have interference from that abnormal course condition, and you just don't want to play from there, wherever your relief area would be, whether it was a nearest point of complete relief or a maximum available relief. If you decide, I just don't want to play from the bunker at all, for a penalty stroke, you can drop the original ball or another ball back on the line from the spot from where that original ball, or from where your original ball lies in the abnormal course condition, through the flag stick. So you can see that line extending back. Player would be allowed to drop anywhere on that line as far back as they would like, but that would cost them a penalty stroke. So if you're bringing it outside of the bunker, when you could have free relief inside the bunker, it is going to cost you a penalty stroke. All right, so your reference point is going to be the spot on the ground where the ball first touches that line that goes straight back from the flag stick, and that's going to create your 1 club length relief area, and that can be, in this very single circumstance, when you're doing back on the line relief, it can actually be any direction. So even if the ball were to hit and roll forward, as long as it didn't roll more than a club length, you would be able to play it from that spot. It would be in play. But the limit is going to be that spot must not be nearer the hole than the spot of the original ball, and it may be in any area of the course except the same bunker. So since you were taking relief and paying for it with that penalty stroke from that bunker, you would not want the ball to then roll back into the bunker and have to play it from there. Okay, so we're going to talk about relief for a ball on the putting green. Yesterday, Tom and I were at a qualifier down at Magnolia Greens in Leland, North Carolina, for anybody that's been down that direction. And we had quite a bit of temporary water out there, didn't we, Tom? we actually had this exact scenario. We had to delay play even after it got sunny after our thunderstorm because we had areas like this out on the putting green. So this does happen. It happens to us, happens to you. And sometimes you can keep playing and sometimes you can't. But we're going to talk about what you do if you come into contact with this sort of situation. So if a player's ball is on the putting green and there is interference by an abnormal course condition on the course, most times it's going to be something like this, the temporary water. The player may take free relief by placing the original ball or another ball on the spot of the nearest point of complete relief. So the big thing to remember here is we're on the putting green. So we very, very, very rarely ever drop a ball on the putting green. So in this case, we're going to place the ball on the spot where you would have that nearest point of complete relief. The nearest point of complete relief must be either on the putting green or in the general area. So you can see in this illustration that this player may end up having to take their relief in the general area, that fringe area, because the temporary water interferes on their line of play. So now they would place that ball there right on the fringe and they would have a completely clear line of play to the hole. If there is no such nearest point of complete relief like we talked about earlier, the player may still take free relief by using the point of maximum available relief as the reference point, which must be either on the putting green or in the general area. All right, Tom, we got any questions we need to talk about?
We actually just got one, so please clarify another ball. Do you mean you can replace the ball with another clean ball?
That is correct. So the rules of golf will say this over and over again. And basically when it says the original ball or another ball, that means that you are allowed to substitute your golf ball. So anytime that you're taking relief under a rule, you are allowed to substitute a ball. So if I'm taking relief from a cart path, let's say, and I decide, I don't really like this Titleist 2. It's got a cart path scratch on it now. I'm taking relief from the cart path. I would be allowed to then get another ball out of my bag. I'll grab my Shrixon 7, and then I will drop my ball at the nearest point of relief and play that Shrixon. Don't have to play my original.
We also had a request to clarify the last slide that we were on.
Okay. I think maybe you're confused about the nearest point of complete relief, or the nearest point of maximum available relief could be on the putting green or in the general area. So basically we're just saying that when you're determining this spot, it could be either on the putting green or it could be off the putting green in the general area, which would be the fringe there around the putting green. If that's not clarifying enough, then you can write us back and I'll try and work on that for you. Good. All right. If we were in person, I would say who all has seen an alligator on the golf course before, which is probably a lot of you because we live here in the Carolinas, which we have tons of alligators all along the coast. Hopefully that's the only spot. And so this situation can come up quite often. So good to talk about. So we're going to talk about what to do if you do encounter a dangerous animal condition, which the rules say exists when a dangerous animal, such as venomous snakes, stinging bees, alligators, fire ants, or bears, that's a shout out for any of my Western, North and South Carolina folks, are near a ball and could cause serious physical injury to the player if they had to play the ball as it lies. So when is relief allowed? A player may take relief under Rule 16.2b from interference by a dangerous animal condition, no matter where his or her ball is on the course. This rule does not apply to other situations on the course that could cause physical harm, such as this caddy who has unfortunately come into contact with a cactus. So this is just saying it's only going to cover dangerous animal condition is only going to cover the things that it covers, dangerous animals. All right, when there is interference by a dangerous animal condition, when the ball is anywhere except in a penalty area. So what is that going to mean? If the ball is in a general area, the ball's in the bunker, or if the ball's on the putting green, the player can take relief the way that we just talked about under this rule. So finding that nearest point of complete relief, which is in their area of the course, and taking relief there. If the ball is in the penalty area, the player may take free relief by playing inside the penalty area under this rule, except that the nearest point of complete relief and the relief area must be in the penalty area. So you're not going to be able to get out of the penalty area for free just because there's a dangerous animal there. However, if you are thinking to yourself, I really cannot play this ball from inside the penalty area because this alligator is right here on my, right here in front of me, you are allowed to still proceed under that rule and take penalty relief outside the penalty area. So you obviously still have that option. If there is interference by a dangerous animal condition where the ball would be played after taking the penalty relief outside the penalty area, then the player can take further relief under this rule without additional penalty. So if I've got the alligator inside the penalty area, I need to get away from the alligator by taking penalty relief outside of the penalty area. And then where I would drop, which in this case, we'll talk about this at a further seminar, but probably would be our 2 club links from the edge of that penalty area. I may still have interference from that dangerous animal condition, so I would be allowed to then take further relief. Again, we've got this clause where it says no relief when it's clearly unreasonable to play the ball. So if it's clearly unreasonable to play a ball and an alligator happens to be close to it, you're not going to get free relief just because the alligator is there. This would be in one of those situations where a ball is like, stuck inside a tree, but there happens to be a venomous snake near it. If you're not going to be able to play it, you're not going to get that relief. All right, so for the purpose of this rule, the nearest point of complete relief means the nearest point not near the hole where the dangerous animal condition does not exist. So for me, the nearest point of complete relief from an alligator is going to be quite a distance away because that is where I am going to feel that the dangerous animal condition does not exist. But I get asked this question a lot when, especially when I'm at a course where there are dangerous animal conditions. And the answer is, I can't tell you, 15 feet away from this alligator is where the condition no longer exists. It's going to be up to you as the player. You've got to use your best judgment and find that nearest point. Questions, Tom?
We're good to go.
Everybody's good. All right, moving right along. We're almost getting to the end of our presentation here. Last thing we're going to talk about is embedded ball. So we're going to talk about when you can get relief from a ball that is embedded. So first, our definition: when a player's ball is in its own pitch mark made as a result of the player's previous stroke and where part of the ball is below the level of the ground. A ball does not necessarily have to touch soil in order to be embedded. For example, grass and loose impediments may be between the ball and the soil. Just a reminder, relief is allowed under this rule only when a player's ball is embedded in the general area. So that's going to include any area of the course that is not the putting green, the teeing area of the hole being played, penalty areas, or bunkers. So a ball cannot be embedded in a bunker. There is no relief under this rule if the ball is embedded anywhere except in the general area. So this fried egg up here or a ball embedded in the penalty area is not going to get relief. But if the ball is embedded on the putting green, the player may mark the spot of the ball and lift, clean the ball, repair the damage caused by the ball's impact, and replace the ball on its original spot. I know all of us are hitting the ball into the green with a ton of spin, so this probably happens all the time, at least for Tom. So if your ball does embed into the green like this, no problem. You're just gonna mark it, fix that pitch mark, and put the ball back. There are some exceptions. So there is no relief when the ball is embedded in sand in a part of the general area that is not cut to fairway height or less. So this looks a lot like the sand hills here around the Pinehurst area. If a ball is embedded in sand that is considered to be part of the general area, there would not be relief for that embedded ball. So no relief in sand that is in the general area not cut to fairway height or less. Again, we've got our clearly unreasonable clause here. So if the ball ends up embedded under this tree like this, the stroke is clearly unreasonable. Therefore, we would not get relief for an embedded ball. All right, internal definition here of embedded. So a player's ball is embedded only if it is in its own pitch mark. So if a ball rolls and then goes into a pitch mark that is not its own, it is not embedded. And that pitch mark must be made as a result of the player's previous stroke. And part of the ball is below the surface of the ground. We just talked about this, but worth repeating. So it must be below the surface of the ground. If the player cannot tell for sure whether the ball is in its own pitch mark or a pitch mark made by another ball, player may treat the ball as embedded if it is reasonable to conclude from the available information that the ball is in its own pitch mark. So if, it's just Tom and I playing, I played from, 180 yards away from the hole, we get up there and we see that this ball is embedded in the fringe, it is going to be reasonable to conclude that it's in its own pitch mark, even though we didn't necessarily see it embed. A ball is not embedded if it is below the level of the ground as a result of anything other than the player's previous stroke, such as when the ball is pushed into the ground by someone stepping on it, or the ball is driven straight into the ground without becoming airborne. Some of us have probably been there before. Or the ball was dropped taking relief under a rule. So it's not embedded if it went under the surface of the ground when dropped, when taking relief. Okay, so here's how we're going to take relief from an embedded ball. For when a player's ball is embedded in the general area, relief is allowed. The player may take free relief by dropping the original ball or another ball. There's that substitution clause we talked about. Since we're taking relief, we are allowed to substitute a different ball if we would like. And it must be in this relief area. So your reference point is going to be the spot of the general area directly behind where the ball is embedded. So that spot should be as close as possible to the spot where it is embedded. So you don't have to take a stance. You don't have to do anything else. It's just the spot directly behind where that ball is embedded. The relief area is going to be a club length. But with these limits, it must be in the general area and it must not be nearer the hole than the reference point. So that's just saying you can't drop it in the sand, you can't drop it in a penalty area, even if that would be inside that one club length area. You do have to drop it in the general area inside that one club length relief area from that spot directly behind where the ball is embedded. And that's it for embedded ball. We have any questions to talk about, Tom?
So we had two questions, one that I'm actually not sure about.
Uh-oh.
Where is the relief for a dangerous animal on a tee box?
Hmm. So, good question. That's when we're going to need to get the committee involved, I think. You are required to play from the teeing area, which is only that 2 club length area from exactly where the tees are. So in this case, I think you'd have to wait until the dangerous animal condition was resolved, or meaning, the alligator ambles away and leaves. And what I would do is call the pro shop, call a rules official, call your friend that's an alligator handler, and have them come out and take care of that dangerous animal condition. But I don't think there's anything in the rule that's going to get you out of playing from your teeing area on that hole. So we're going to have to resolve that situation.
Next one is if a ball rolls into a previous player's pitch mark, is there relief? And the answer to that one is there is not. For the embedded ball, it has to be in your own pitch mark. So if you end up rolling into another player's pitch mark, then you would not get relief from that one. And then what if somebody drives a cart over your ball or steps on it and it embeds? Is there relief? Which I believe there would be relief. Do not.
There is. So if that would be not covered under this rule, but since we're on final questions, we'll allow it. So that would be a ball that has been moved by what we call an outside agency, which is that other player. So if another player were to, say, run over your ball with a golf cart or step on your ball, you would be allowed to put the ball back where it was, which in this case, that area where your ball was has probably been altered, which means that you don't have the same lie of ball that you had before. So you would find the nearest spot most similar and place it in that spot, which is probably just going to be, a few inches away.
Other than that, that's all the questions we have.
All the questions we have. Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. We're happy to be doing these. Great